Have a couple keys, got the whole block looking at.
Hello and welcome in here to Off the Bench here on a special Tuesday edition here live from the Chatterbox Studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ohio. I'm Reed Mouse taking you through the day, and we have a good show for you. We're going to talk, kind of give you my thoughts on the Bengals and how I thought they played Sunday. It's a busy week because we had the Bengals play on Sunday. They've got a division game on Thursday. And the Bearcats are ranked in the top 25, so we'll have someone come on later this week talking about the Bearcats. But today we're going to be talking about the Bengals, how they played on Sunday, and kind of just where the state of the NFL is. Because out of all the years that we've been doing media here at Chatterbox Sports, this is the most confusing year that I've seen about which team's elite, which team's really good, and we'll probably end up just with the Chiefs winning a Super Bowl all over again because it doesn't look like anyone else is going to take it up for grabs. Stone Shields in the producer's chair. I'm glad to be back here. Wasn't here yesterday. He had a great show yesterday, Stone, and I made sure to. He gave me crap because he says you never watch my show. So working out today, I listened to Stone's show yesterday, and you had a great show yesterday. And I'm glad to be back and glad to talk some football with you, Stone.
Yeah, me too. I'm happy that you're here. And look, I think we're all, it's Tuesday. We're kind of flipping the page a little bit here. Short week for the Bengals to Thursday Night Football. But I know we're all eager to get your thoughts on what transpired at Lambeau Field because I certainly was encouraged with what we saw from our Cincinnati Bengals. And I know we're all looking forward to hearing what you have to say, along with some rumors that have been circulating about one of our edge rushers, Trey Hendrickson.
Some rumors, some scuttlebutt, some I don't know any other ways to describe. I don't know any other synonyms of rumors. But yeah, listen, guys, we got to have a talk. We got to have a conversation right here, right now. And it is about our best defensive player. It is about the only defensive player that other fans know of. And that's Trey Hendrickson. And we are at a spot with the Cincinnati Bengals where Trey Hendrickson's on a 1-year deal. His contract's up at the end of this one. And I got to be honest with you guys. He ain't coming back. He's not. He's going to go to the highest bidder. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the highest bidder is not going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. So we have a decision to make. The Bengals currently sit at 2-4, 6 games into the season. We're on a 4-game losing streak. And while the rest of the conference, the division maybe even, seems like it's up for grabs and you can convince yourself based on a better performance on Sunday that this team can hang around and maybe they can get into the postseason, that's all good. That's all true, and I believe in all of that. But we've got to come to the realization that the best course forward is to trade Trey. It's not, we should do this. It's not, what do you think about this? It's, we need to do this. And there's a couple different reasons why. The first and foremost is the point that I already laid out. And that is, next year, 2026, the Cincinnati Bengals defensive front, by all likelihood, by all accounts, will not include Trey Hendrickson. So while he's here, in a year where it seemingly seems like the Bengals are heading nowhere, you've got to get something for what is your best defensive player. Now we can talk about the value of that, like what we can get back in return for him, and we'll get to that in a moment. But another reason that we need to do this is to kind of give an audit of this defense. We know what Trey Hendrickson is. He's an elite pass rusher. One of the best in the game, truly. One of the best in the game. And if he was playing on a premier franchise, like the team we're playing this Thursday, the Pittsburgh Steelers, like the team we just played last Sunday, the Green Bay Packers, he played for the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Giants or the San Francisco 49ers, he'd be talked about in much higher esteem than he's talked about currently. And people around the league know who he is, and people around the league know how great he is. I mean, he led the league in sacks. But we know what he is. We don't know what the rest of the defense is. We have to do an audit of our pass rushers. And we can't do that with Trey Hendrickson taking up a great majority of half the snaps. Or half the side of the ball. We've used a first-round draft pick on an edge rusher 2 of the last 3 years. And Shamar's been hurt, and it's his rookie year, so you wouldn't know what you have anyways. But Myles Murphy, we haven't even been able to see a whole lot because not only was he behind Trey Hendrickson, but he was behind Sam Hubbard the last few years. Joseph Asai was, a third-round pick many years ago, but a third-round pick, that's pretty good draft capital on an edge rusher. Cam Sample's also on the roster. Maybe you can, get a few snaps out of him, and he can make some great plays. But point blank, we need to understand that going into this offseason, if we once again need to put some capital towards the edge rushing position, which is the third most important position on the field behind quarterback and our tackles, your offensive tackles. We need to know if we're going to spend a first, second, third round pick on an edge rusher once again. We need to know if we're going to go out and sign a veteran edge rusher that, point blank, you're not. The fact that we got Trey Hendrickson in free agency is amazing. That doesn't happen very often. Typically, when someone is that good at that premier position, and people didn't know what Trey Hendrickson was before he came here. Like, he had great years, but everyone always said, oh, he's a Cam Jordan merchant. Players like him don't come on the market all that often. So you're not going to get a premier edge rusher in free agency, but you can get a solid guy. And unless we trade Trey, we're not going to know what we have with Shamar when he comes back, or Miles Murphy and Joseph Asai. And they might be terrible, but we'd at least like to know that. This defense is showing steady improvement. It is. I still don't think that it's top half of the league defense, and I think you're foolish if you do believe that. But we are seeing some nice things. Maybe the bar was so low with this defensive unit that anything positive, we're just like, oh, that's pretty nice. Like the way that they played in that first half, even though they gave up 27 points. The way that they played against the Detroit Lions, even though they gave up 37 points. Like, even all those things, we've seen some nice things. And point blank, we need to understand what we have with this defensive unit. And we're probably not going to see that unless Trey is off the team. Now, here's what I'll say about what we can get back for him. The trade deadline is November 4th. It'll be the same week that we are heading into the bye. We have the Steelers right now. Then we play the Jets and the Bears. Those are three games that, if you have any hope or of the mirage that this Bengals team can make the postseason, you're going to need to play well in those games. But even if, say the Bengals win all three of them, and I'm being dead serious, even if the Bengals win all three of those games, I still think you should trade Trey. And if the Bengals win all three of those games, his value will actually be higher because we will not be in a place of where everyone in the league knows we need to get rid of him. Now, I'll also say if we win all those three games, the likelihood of trading Trey Hendrickson is pretty much zero from this front office. But I'd still hold fast that we got to get rid of him. Now, if we lose all three games, including a game to the lowly New York Jets, then the value of Trey Hendrickson is going to go drastically down because we'd have no leverage because everyone knows that we're trying to dump him. Now, can we still probably get like a third round pick for him? Yeah. And I'm at the point with Trey where, and this sounds, when you're talking about leverage, it sounds counterproductive, but I'd be willing to part with him for kind of any price tag because I know he's not going to be here next year, and I want to see what we have. I gotta figure out answers on this question mark of a defense, on this question mark of a team. We're gonna have a lot of money to spend this offseason. We're gonna have draft picks, and we can get a few more if we trade Trey Hendrickson. I gotta know how much capital, how many resources we are putting towards the problem that is our edge rushing ability, our pass rushing ability, which isn't great right now, even with Trey Hendrickson. It's going to get worse. This defense is going to be worse. But you've got to know what you have. And right now, we are not going to be able to do that. Now, if someone calls up the Cincinnati Bengals and says, we'll give you a second-round pick right now for Trey Hendrickson, you do not hang up the phone. You stay on that line. You get somebody else. You get one of your assistants to call up the league office, and you push it through. 3 third-round pick, that's probably right in the sweet spot of where you're going to get Trey. And you got to remember, these are also more than likely late-round picks because they'd be going to contenders. They'd be going to the 49ers because I know they have some problems. They have a lot of injuries. Where they are, you all of a sudden you can put some leverage on them because they're desperate. And I've seen people say, I wouldn't do it for anything less than a third, and that's okay. I'd be willing to see what kind of options you have in terms of players. Like, it just doesn't have to be draft capital. You can give me a player back, and we assess it there. But as it sits here, and the rumors are going to keep swirling if the Bengals keep on this slide. The rumors will swirl regardless if the Bengals win some games about what you do with Trey Hendrickson. But for two reasons, I think you got to get rid of him. And the reasons are, he's not going to be here next year, and you got to figure out what you have with the other guys. The 2 first-round picks that you've used in the last 3 years, and Joseph Asai and Canton, you got to figure out if we're going to spend more drafts, early first, second-round picks on an edge rusher, or if we're going to spend free agency money on a veteran guy. And I don't know who's available in the free agency this year, except for Trey. But you've got to figure out what you're going to do. Stone, your thoughts on the idea of, regardless of what happens these next 3 weeks, wins and losses, whatever it is, getting rid of Trey because, A, he's not going to be here, and B, we got to understand what we have with this pass rushing unit.
I agree with a lot of the things you said. Obviously, Trey Hendrickson is not going to be a Cincinnati Bengal next year. Even if, Joe Burrow was still here and they went on this crazy playoff run, got to the Super Bowl, this was it for Trey Hendrickson. I think we all understand that. 3 games until the bye. Thursday night, and then you got games against quote-unquote weaker opponents, but the Bears obviously just pulled off an upset last night. You got them and the Jets going into the bye. The deadline is on November 4th, and you and I were talking off the air, well, if you wait right until the deadline, maybe the value that you can move him, you're not getting as much in return because teams understand that, okay, obviously you are going to move him,
desperate,
so
yeah.
his value would go down a little bit. I think you're still in a spot, given the state of the AFC and how you played in the second half on offense against Green Bay. To me, it's 2-1 going into the bye. If you are 2-1 going into the bye, you ride it out and see what you can do. But if you drop one of those games to the Bill or the Jets or the Bears, you're 1-2, you're 0-3. Then I think you move him. But I think you just have to sit here and wait until you get into the bye. Now, if you didn't trade for Joe Flacco and you were just running this thing with Jake Browning, I would agree with you and say, yeah, let's move him right now because this thing's over. But you had some newfound life. You added a quarterback. You traded for Joe Flacco. And there's an opportunity here ahead of you. So I totally am with you in the sense that he's not going to be back next year. And obviously, if you keep him on the team throughout the entirety of this year, then he walks and you get nothing for him. So if you can potentially make a trade where you get some value, right, something the Bengals typically don't do, but shoot, they just did it with Joe Flacco, obviously. But I need to see a couple of more weeks with this Flacco project before moving him at this point. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that I said that we got to get rid of him, and it's fully understanding that if Trey Hendrickson's not here, we saw Trey Hendrickson banged up in the second half, and the defense took a major step back just this past Sunday. We saw that, how important he is to this defense. He's one of the best defensive players in the league, and this team that is showing improvement would be at a massive disadvantage, more so than they already are if you miss him. But I've got to figure out what we have. That's my opinion. I need to know whether we can rely on Shamar Stewart and Myles Murphy going into next year. And I think there's a lot of Bengals fans that would sit here and go, we already know what we have. We got to go get another piece. We've got Myles Murphy ain't it. We've only seen a couple games of Shamar Stewart, but the combination of Joseph Asai, Myles Murphy, and Shamar Stewart isn't it. How much credence or how much weight do you put on the ideal of, hey, we've got to see these young guys play? And Trey Hendrickson, as great as he is taking snaps away from guys that we've got to understand if they got the ability or not to play.
Yeah, I think the fact that Shamar hasn't been available over the course of the past few weeks plays into that largely. If this was something where, he was continuing to show promising signs, which he did, by the way, before he got hurt, and we were seeing him over the course of these past few weeks, even in the blowout losses, and Shamar Stewart was out there producing on the football field, maybe I feel a little bit different, but his time will come when he's healthy. He practiced at a limited capacity last week. We'll see if he can go on a short week. That certainly would help Cincinnati if he can. But beyond him, I think we know what we have. Joseph Osai is on the 1-year prove-it deal. credit to him. He's better than I thought he would be this year, but is he a real difference maker for you? No. I mean, he showed up in the first half of the Green Bay game, certainly. Behind him, Cam Sample, who I liked, as a late round guy that, he had the Achilles injury last year, and it's like, okay, he can be serviceable, but if he's out there playing a lot of snaps, that isn't a good situation, right? And then, Myles Murphy, he's had opportunities this year, and I think, he's not a first-round guy. Is he a complete bust? I lean yes, right? Can he be like a guy that looks like a fifth-rounder out there? Yeah, maybe, but he clearly isn't a first-round guy. I just think they've seen it with a lot of these guys. Cedric Johnson, 6th-round pick a couple of years ago. He's on IR. So, it looks a little bit different if Shamar Stewart's healthy, but I think they know what they have at that edge rusher spot, and they don't feel good about it deep down within that organization. And they understand that if they move Trey Hendrickson, they're kind of punting on the season.
Zach Taylor actually said about the Shamar Stewart injury, said he's optimistic about him.
Okay, that's big.
He's in his press conference yesterday, said he's optimistic, which is big. It's big. We'll continue to see. All right, AJ Worse in the chat put in there, you got to get rid of him because the season is a loss. I'm not fully there. I still am holding on. Maybe it's a desperate case of hope, and we'll get into what I saw from the Bengals on Sunday. I'm holding on because as a fan, I like to see my team compete, and I don't want to completely tank, even though it's kind of probably the better course of action going forward. But point blank, we know Trey's not going to be here next year, and I want to get as many bullets in the chamber when it comes to the draft. I want to clear up some of that space so we can spend it on a free agent this offseason. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Give me likelihood. Give me, I don't know if you want to do it betting odds. I don't want to do it percentage-wise, that Trey Hendrickson is traded this season. Your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. It all depends on the record going into the bye. I think if they're 0-3 or 1-2 going into the bye, I think there is a coin flip chance, a 50-50 chance that they make the move. And if they're 2-1 or 3-0 going into the bye, they won't make the move. I'd say 0% if it's 2-1 or 3-0, and 50% if they are 1-2 or 0-3. For the record, other organizations, those numbers would be juiced up a lot more. But just with the Cincinnati Bengals and where they're at, I would say it's a coin flip going into the bye if they go 0-3 or 1-2.
I think it's 50. And Nate Seltzer puts in a really good point in the chat, and this is where some of my knowledge about comp rules and stuff like that. He puts in there that getting rid of Trey for anything less than a third is malpractice. You'll get a third-round comp pick when he leaves. So you have to ensure at minimum you get a third. So that's a good point, is anything less than a third, which I was at the point where I was like, man, if you got to get rid of him, so whatever you can take. But that's a really, really nice point. And for what it's worth, some team will be desperate enough to give us at least a third. They will be. You can stay optimistic about a second. I say this again. If someone calls up and says, we'll give you a second right now for Trey Hendrickson, you don't hang up the phone. I truly mean that. You trade him away, and you get that second-round pick in, and you use that second-round pick, or you use one of your first 3 picks, the first or one of them in the second on another edge rusher, or you spend money, and you just kind of keep reloading talent, and hopefully we start hitting on some draft picks, because that's where teams win. That's point blank where you win. You gotta hit on those draft picks, and when you get them, you got to keep them around. All right. So that wraps up the Trey Hendrickson conversation. You got to talk a lot about the Bengals game on Sunday. I did the post-game show talking about the Bengals and the Packers. They played better, I guess. They still lost by almost double digits. Not quite double digits, 9 points. Got a little exciting there at the end of the fourth quarter, and we kind of got to see this offense moving. But, Stone, I know you wanted to ask me some questions about the Packers-Bengals game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you did the post-game show, but we're eager to get your thoughts and opinions here on Off the Bench. Yesterday on my show, I really took the optimistic route, and I think that personally was the right route to take. Okay. Obviously, in the beginning of the game, offensively, nothing was going the right way. Kind of can expect that for a guy that showed up on Tuesday, and he's the trigger man of your offense, but he clearly settled in the game, and I think there's reason to be optimistic with what Cincinnati did on the football field in the second half offensively, and what they did in the first half on the field defensively. Obviously, complimentary football, people talk about it all the time, and that was kind of the kicker, right? There's been things that Zach Taylor has said. 1 week it was the penalties, 2 weeks it was the turnovers. This week it wasn't good enough complimentary football for Cincinnati to win. But my question to you is simple. Did the Bengals inspire hope in you with their performance at Lambeau Field?
Yeah, point blank, I think they did. And the reason that I think that is because it might have been graded on a scale of what I've seen the Bengals play the 3 weeks prior, right? It might have been graded on a scale of I saw them lose by 38 to a mediocre Vikings team. I saw them lose by 25 to a team that is a good team in the AFC, but how good's the AFC in the Denver Broncos? And then I honestly saw them play their worst game against the Detroit Lions. It didn't end up that way. I think maybe the Lions were chewing with their food a little bit, playing with their food. But 3 consecutively non-comp just did not play well for 3 consecutive weeks to where we looked, you heard this thrown around, we are the worst team in the league, because that's what the Bengals looked like for 3 consecutive weeks. And you go to Green Bay, you go on the road, you have a guy that got into the system on Tuesday/Wednesday. He drove down on Tuesday. The trade was made on Tuesday. His first practice was Wednesday. And he's learning the system. Joe Flacco played terrible for the first half, but kind of got it moving in the second half. And you competed against a Green Bay Packers team that you were 14-point underdogs against, that at one point looked like the best team in the NFL. I don't know if they still are, but I anticipate that they'll still be a contender come years in. I anticipate that they will be in the postseason and that they'll probably win a postseason game. So you make the heartbeats of Packers fans raise a little bit when you score that touchdown and you get the 2-point conversion, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, we might win this game. So yeah, they inspire hope, because for the first time since week 2, they played good football. For only a half on each side of the ball. First half, it was the defense. Second half, it was the offense. And as you mentioned, Zach Taylor said you can't play complimentary football. And this team's not good enough to have the offense no-show for 2 quarters or have the defense no-show for 2 quarters. They're not good enough to do that. Other teams can do it. The Philadelphia Eagles do that every single week. Philadelphia Eagles can't figure out a half of football that they want to play. One half, they look like the best team that you've ever seen. And then the second half, they're like, who is this team? Bengals aren't talented enough. They're not good enough to do that. They need to play better, more cohesive, and complement each other. And there will be moments where you see that throughout this year. And I think I felt that because of the way that they played. And I'm being dead serious when I say this. My opinion on what the rest of this season should be changes on a day-to-day basis. One day I will say, as I said 2 weeks ago, tear it all down. Strip it down to the studs. And no, I don't. I no longer think that was probably just being an overzealous fan about, should we trade Joe Burrow? No, I'm off that. I'm off that. That was just knee-jerk reaction. Stone laughed at me, and he deserved to laugh at me because I was being a little too animated there. But I still think that there's times where, like, hey, you look at this team, and we should be getting as high in the draft as we possibly can, because you got a higher likelihood of not only hitting on the draft, but hitting a high-impact player if you get in those top 5 picks. But then the next day I'll go, okay. I see 3 wins at the end of the year. We got the Bears and the Jets here at home. Then through the next 3 weeks, if we win all those games, that's 5 games. We're up to 7 games. Can we find 3 other and get 10? Like I start doing the schedule math of, can we make it happen? Can we keep this season afloat, as you keep hearing people say? Can you keep it afloat? Can you keep it propped up till Joe Burrow, who, by the way, we don't even know if he's coming back? Can we do that? And then the next day I'm right back to, oh, this team's bad again. We should tank. I literally go day to day of what this team should be. And to be honest, and the reason I do that is because I truly don't know what the best course forward is. I don't know what this team's going to be. There's a chance this team goes 2-15. There's a chance this team goes 10-7. There's a chance, and the most likely chance is they're probably like 6-11 or 7-10. And what does that get you? Nothing. It gets you nothing. So I flip-flop every single day on what I think this team should be. But at the core of me as a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I like sitting down on a Sunday and watching my favorite team compete. And they did that on Sunday. And I anticipate they'll do that this Thursday. And I anticipate they'll do that in their 2 games against the Jets and the Bills, or Jets and the Bears following that. And when you ask me the question, did this Bengals performance inspire hope? Yeah, it did. Because I saw this team be the worst team in football for 3 consecutive weeks. And I saw them raise the heart rate of Packers fans in the fourth quarter in Lambeau Field. So yeah, I'm a little hopeful. And I can't shake that they're going to win this Thursday. Stone, next question.
Specifically as it relates to Joe Flacco, I personally thought that went about as good as it possibly could have. I think coming in on Tuesday, first practice on Wednesday, for you to sit there and expect him to play better than how he played in Green Bay, I don't think that is a realistic expectation. Personally, what are your thoughts on Joe Flacco's first start as a Cincinnati Bengal?
So when we got Joe Flacco, we did the live stream, and I was in the truck, and I was capturing all like, man, we made an in-season trade, and it's for the guy. I would have, honestly, I would have probably preferred like a Jameis Winston, as everyone mentioned, or a Russell, like someone younger that I don't know, just Joe Flacco just quite didn't do it for me. But we came to the agreement that this team is now better based off of what we've seen with Jake Browning. And through the first start with Joe Flacco, it's undeniable that this team is incredibly more competent with Joe Flacco. There were several plays that your knee-jerk reaction, there's one that comes up to mind. I forget the exact moment in the game, but it's 3rd and 5. We're in our own territory. I think it was definitely in the second half. And the Packers blitz 6 guys. And they're sending 6 to rush the passer. And Joe had no time. And what does he do? He knows T. Higgins is doing an out route past the first down line, and he gets rid of it and delivers a strike right to where T. Higgins is going to be. And we get a first down. And watching that live, I saw that same play with Jake Browning. And what happens with Jake Browning? He takes the sack because he doesn't read it well enough. He sees the pressure, tries to evade it, and he takes a sack. Joe isn't in the business of trying to get away from sacks because, quite honestly, he can't get away from sacks. And when you don't have that option, it gives you 2. Well, it gives you 1. Get rid of the ball. Either to an intended target or off the field of play. And he did it right there. If you would have told me we dropped back Joe Flacco 45 times and only got sacked 1 time and didn't turn the ball over, I would have called you crazy. But it's pretty clear Joe Flacco, above all else, he understands who he is as a quarterback. He's had an incredibly successful career. He's won a Super Bowl. He's 40 years old. He understands he's an immobile guy with a really good arm and a great understanding of how to play. So my initial reaction on Joe Flacco's start, this team is better. I think with a little more time and a little more chemistry built up with him and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and you saw that kind of chemistry happening in real time. Jamar Chase didn't even get a practice with Joe Flacco because he was sick all week. Jamar Chase built that chemistry in real time, and you just saw them force-feeding the best receiver in the league in the second half, and it worked. We're going to continue to see that fold. And here's the thing about Joe. One of the big things of Jake Browning was that he just kept turning the ball over. Joe Flacco is going to throw interceptions. They were 2 of the 3 leaders in interceptions. Joe Flacco is going to throw some picks in his time starting here. And he's going to take some sacks because our offensive line isn't very good. But you're going to understand. He's going to understand how to avoid those deficiencies. And I'm okay with Joe Flacco throwing some picks when we're making downfield threats. Jake Browning had no threats downfield. So we're just throwing picks without having the benefit of making big plays. So initial reaction of Joe Flacco's first start, this team is in a much better spot. Next question.
Totally agree. And that's why we're going to win on Thursday, right? The offensive line. I thought early in the game it was kind of more of the same, and you're like, oh boy, right? Obviously no Dylan Fairchild. He's out. Dalton Reisner, he's in. But then as the game went on, as you mentioned, only 1 sack, it seemed like they started to play a little bit better. Orlando Brown Jr. continued to have some bad moments. Marius Mims got dinged up. Cody Ford was in the game. Lots of turmoil there at that spot, but they kind of hung in there. What are your overall thoughts on their performance?
So this is where I'll give credit. They played great. Like I just said, 45 dropbacks of Joe Flacco, who cannot move. If you would have told me facing that Green Bay Packers pass rush that includes Micah Parsons, that he'd get sacked one time and it wouldn't even be from Micah Parsons, from Lucas Van Ness, I would have called you crazy. And the knee-jerk, probably overreaction that you can have as watching that is that, and maybe it's true, Joe Flacco knows how to call out pressures better and knows how to navigate and elevates the play of the offensive line. That's one thing that people can say about Joe Burrow is there's kind of a lengthy evidence that he doesn't elevate offensive line play. Like we're always quickly to be like, our offensive line stinks, but we keep asking ourselves, hey, we keep bringing in these guys that were productive in other places, and they get here in Cincinnati and they suck. Is it our coaching? Is it our scheme? Is it Joe Burrow? Whatever it is. In the first start of Joe Flacco, the offensive line had really high pass blocking grades. They did a nice job. I think Samaje Perine and Drew Sample did a nice job chip blocking at times for Joe Flacco. I think Joe Flacco might, the knee-jerk reaction is he might elevate this offensive line to block better for him. We'll see. Only time will tell.
Yeah, I think so the grades were all right there with the PFF grades with the offensive line?
I think, we had like most of them were like up in the 80s, which 60 is normally average. Like there was a couple in the 80s.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll certainly take that. Moving on, Logan Wilson. Was looked at, he's a captain on this football team, one of the leaders of the defense. He was benched in this game, only played about 20% of the defensive snaps. They went with Barrett Carter. That means they went with 2 rookies at that linebacker spot. Obviously, linebacker, a very important communication position, and you got 2 rookies out there. And just interested to know what your thoughts are on that. No Logan Wilson.
Logan Wilson was my second favorite Cincinnati Bengal, favorite defensive player during those Super Bowl runs. And 2 years ago, 2023, when you took an audit of who was good on this defensive unit behind Trey Hendrickson, really the only players that you could look at were Logan Wilson, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Jordan Battle. And here we are in 2025, and all 3 of those guys might not be it. It's shocking. It truly is. He essentially got, what did he play? What did we look this up before the show? 11 snaps? I think he played 11 snaps.
It was about 20%, so yeah, it was like 13, 12, something like that.
And he didn't play at all in the second half. So he essentially got benched. And it goes back to what I said earlier of, if it's not working, it's not working with the veterans. You can't keep running the veterans out there. Essentially, you draft these young guys, these young players that are hungry to make a name for themselves in the league, and you might get, just based off desperation and a hunger that you might get better play. If you would have told me before the season that at one point Logan Wilson will get benched, I would tell you point blank that this team is terrible. And they might be still. They still might be terrible. But we'll continue to see if Logan Wilson keeps sitting on the sideline and Barrett Carter keeps getting more snaps. And Barrett Carter didn't play great, but it was his first, time playing significant snaps. So he's he's a rookie. He's going to continue to grow, and he's playing against one of the best offenses in the league. So this is a wait and see thing to see if, Logan Wilson is going to take some time off or if he's going to continue to just kind of be a third rotation. If you want a positive spin, if you want a good spin zone, if you would have told you before the league that, hey, Logan Wilson's going to be our third linebacker off the bench, you probably would have taken it. You're like, oh, man, we must be playing great then. Must be playing great because he was one of the known quantities on this defense. Now it meant that Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter were playing out of their minds. And I think Demetrius Knight has been playing pretty – he shows up well on the screen. I don't know what the grades are, the PFF grades are, but he plays well. Barrett Carter had a couple bad plays, but we'll just continue to see. I don't know what happens with these defensive players. Cam Taylor-Britt 2 years ago looked like a bona fide cornerback 1. Jordan Battle looked to be developing into one of the better safeties in this league. Logan Wilson looked about as surefire as you get from a middle linebacker, and that's the reason we extended him. It was a major piece on that 2021-2022 defense. It was one of the stalwarts. But here we are in 2025, and it seems like everyone has taken a step back, at least on those three players. So don't have a huge takeaway from Logan Wilson getting benched, but it's not good for him, not good for his career, and we'll continue to see how it plays out.
Any other areas on the defense that you thought maybe intrigued you a little bit? You thought they played decent football. Obviously, DJ Turner, I know you want to discuss him. He had, in my opinion, the game of his career here to this point. Anybody else on the defense that intrigued you at all with their performance?
I think, and once again, I haven't looked at the PFF grade, but watching that game, we weren't getting a great pass rush. Even in the first half when we were playing well, we weren't getting a great pass rush. And more often than not, Jordan Love, with time to work, wasn't throwing the ball. He's either holding on to it, trying to scramble out, or he'd throw it at the last second, and that's how we got that interception, was he just held on it for too long. And when you're watching that live, your reaction is, our secondary must be locking these dudes down because he's getting time. Jordan Love had time. And there were some huge plays, no doubt about it. They had a 31 and a 39-yard play, huge plays with guys wide open. Matthew Golden, obviously the play that iced the game. Like, there was those plays in the game. You can't disagree with that. But I thought for the most part, this secondary played pretty well. And I wanted to give them credit because I feel like they played pretty well to where if Jordan Love is scrambling out to his right or has plenty of time in the pocket and he's still just holding on to the ball, one of two things is happening. Either Jordan Love's not seeing the field all that well or we're locking down those wide receivers. So I wanted to give credit to the secondary in that regard. But once again, I don't have the PFF grades. That's just as I was watching it, that was my reaction.
Yeah. One last one for you. We didn't discuss this pre-show, but Samaje Perine got a lot of carries in the game, and that was more of a 50-50 split with Chase Brown. I think my opinion is that, well, they understand that you're going to have to run through some contact at the line of scrimmage because this offensive line can't really run block at all, as we know. And I think that maybe contributes a little bit to seeing Samaje get some more carries. What are your thoughts there on that? Yeah,
it's pretty clear that they're you need a guy who can lower his shoulder. And it's not that Chase can't do that, but I don't think anyone around the league or anyone in that room's like, hey, Chase is a bulldozer. He's a great back, and I still have a tremendous amount of confidence in Chase Brown. I loved what we saw last year. There's a reason that he was a very trendy pick to take high in fantasy draft boards because he had, 1,400 yards from the line of scrimmage last year, and it was a weapon out of the backfield in the receiving game and in the rushing game. He's clearly not been able to carry that momentum into this year. Samaje Perine, he's been here 4 of the last 5 years, or he was here when we went to the Super Bowl, was here in the 2022 year. We went to the AFC Championship game, and we're finally bringing him back. Yeah, I think you're spot on when you say that that's a guy that, you realize you're going to have to evade a tackle. You're going to have to lower, or at the very least, we're going to have you fall forward and get that extra yard. There's several backs. I think Josh Jacobs for the Packers did a fantastic job of, even when he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, because he was just moving forward, could get that extra yard. You don't see that often with Chase Brown. You saw that with Joe Mixon at certain times throughout his career, but you definitely see that with Samaje Perine, where they're getting that extra yard, just getting you a little bit of forward momentum. And yeah, I'm cool with them splitting the time up. Obviously, Samaje Perine's a better blocking back. Chase Brown's better out of the backfield in terms of receiving. So to where before the year we were probably thinking it was going to be like an 85-15 split, I'm cool with a more closer to 50-50 split on who gets those carries. And really, if Samaje Perine has a great game, you can see him probably take more and more snaps away from Chase Brown.
Yeah, I agree. I thought you saw him run hard there. I mean, there were a couple of plays where, early on in the game, obviously we weren't running the ball well at all, and then you had some carries there with Perine late in the first half. In the second half, you were getting a little bit of a push, by the way, with your offensive line. I know some Green Bay people were upset, thinking that, forward progress should have been called, but there was a couple where you were really moving the line of scrimmage, and that could be something that's potentially promising for this team going forward. But do we want to transition here?
I'll do the ad reads, and then we'll do buy or sell.
Yeah.
I'll do the ad reads. The Job Center is now hiring. Start working fast with weekly pay, flexible shifts, and great opportunities at top local employers. Apply in person at any location across 12 states or online at thejobcenter.com. Light up your events with Queen City Screens. Our cutting-edge LED video boards deliver vibrant visuals and crystal clear displays for any occasion. From concerts to corporate events, we've got you covered. Visit queencityscreens.com to rent your LED solution today. Queen City Screens, where brilliance meets impact. My eyes are tearing up here because there's something in my nose, and every time the camera goes to you, I'm like trying to get it out of my nose, and it's I got to sneeze or I got to get it out, but we're gonna be a trooper. We're gonna fight through this one. But
that happens to me.
If you see me crying up here, it's not because Stone said something sentimental. It's because something is stuck in my nose.
Yeah. That's fair. I get it with these mics. I don't know if there's something in the mic that does it or whatever, but I have the same issue on my shows. All right, let's get into it. Buy or sell. We love doing this on Tuesdays. Several NFL topics that we will discuss, and the first one is this: buy or sell. The NFC is better than the AFC.
You asked me this a few weeks ago. I don't know if you recall. Probably week 3 of the season, and I said I'm selling because the AFC still had Patrick Mahomes. The AFC still had Lamar Jackson. The AFC still had Josh Allen, even though Joe Burrow was going to be more than likely out for the season. I still thought that even with Justin Herbert and maybe even a guy like Trevor Lawrence can finally step up to, and that clock is pretty much ticked out of time on him, becoming an elite quarterback. But I said I'd take the AFC, and the AFC has been better than the NFC for years now, really for a long time. But it's pretty clear, and I'm going to buy this, the NFC is better than the AFC this year because I look around the AFC and I don't know who is a Super Bowl contender. I don't know who's good. Like, we're looking at the AFC, and I know you're doing your power rankings later. Maybe I'll do them later on this week. But if I did a true power rankings from the top 10 teams in the NFL, I'd probably have 3 AFC teams in there, like 3, and the rest are NFC teams, just to show you how well the NFC and the way they're built is still similar, right? The NFC has been more well-rounded rosters, while the AFC has been quarterback-heavy, and quarterback-heavy has been more competitive here in the league. But when the Buffalo Bills go to the Atlanta Falcons yesterday and really look non-competitive for 4 quarters, you're like, all right, they were supposed to be the best team in the AFC, and the Falcons are a middling pack in the NFC. And that's teams lose all the time in the NFL. It's not that big of a deal, but it's pretty clear that the NFC is better than the AFC. Though I got to tell you, I don't know who the heck is the best teams in the NFL. God bless anyone doing power rankings.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm buying this. I think there's still some debate at the top of both conferences. I think, the Chiefs are 3-3, but they're coming, right? The Bills lost last night, but I think we all understand they're still going to be a threat. So those teams at the top shoot the Colts. They've been really hot, kind of the surprise story of the year. But when you look at the bottom of the conferences, I mean, there's some stinking bad teams in the AFC. The Jets obviously are winless. The Dolphins stink. Ravens stink. Browns stink. Bengals probably stink too. Titans stink. So, I think at the top you could still make an argument. Are the best teams in the AFC better than the best teams in the NFC? Maybe, but there's just too many really, really bad teams in the AFC, so I'm absolutely buying this.
This is the first year where it doesn't feel like there's much of a middle class maybe middle class isn't right. It feels like there's not an elite class in the NFC in the NFL across the board. Like there's terrible teams, like you just mentioned. There's the Jets, there's the Dolphins, there's Cardinals in the NFC, maybe even the Bengals. Like they're Browns, bad teams across the NFL. To where there used to be 3 classes. There used to be the elite teams, like there were the Chiefs and the Bills and the Eagles and everything like that. It doesn't seem to be that elite class this year. It seems like there's like a giant middle class of teams of about 18 teams deep of this team can beat this team on any given week.
Yeah, totally agree. It's exciting, right? Especially in the playoffs. Like obviously you got the quarterbacks and the teams that have been there, done that you think in your mind have an advantage, but there's going to be a lot of fresh blood in the playoffs this year. And that certainly is very exciting. Moving on to our next question. They played last night and they lost. Buy or sell. The Bills are the best team in the AFC despite their defeat on the road against Atlanta last night.
You would ask me this 24 hours ago, I would have said without a doubt. And there was no question about it. But after watching last night and after watching Sunday Night Football, I hate to say it, guys, but the best team in the AFC is probably the Kansas City Chiefs again. It feels like just like when we were at the moment where we were finally out of this nightmare. And I know for years I was the guy on this show that was like, guys, the Chiefs are good. Guys, the Chiefs are good. Guys, the Chiefs are good. And everyone was like, no, they're terrible. If you look at this offense, you look at this, and then they went on and win the Super Bowl. And I was like, guys, this Chiefs are good. It felt like I was finally there where I was like, yeah, this Chiefs team, this might be it. This might be it. Then you see the rest of the AFC. It was finally there, and I still think it is there for the Bills, or if the Chargers were healthy, for the Chargers to take it, or maybe even the freaking Broncos to come out of nowhere and take it. But yeah, I'm selling this because the Bills are not the best team in the AFC. And if you ask me right now who I think the best team in the AFC is, it's unfortunately probably the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know how they keep doing this, man. We were writing them off. We were like, can this team even make the postseason? And here they are. They're probably the best team in the AFC. Your thoughts?
Totally agree. Unfortunately, I don't have them as the top AFC team in my power rankings this week. But if you sat there and said, Stone, who's going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl right now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, right? I think all this we talk about, the parity and no great teams, that's bad news for anybody that hates the Chiefs because that just allows them to have an opportunity with their great head coach and their great quarterback. And, now they're 3-3. Their schedule, something we've discussed in the past, is something that's very difficult. They're going to have tough opponents that they got to play, tough quarterbacks that they have to play. But at the end of the day, if this thing gets muddy and this thing gets close, how could you be more confident in a different team than the Kansas City Chiefs? All they do is go to the conference championship with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. By the way, Mahomes was brilliant in the game against Detroit, and he's playing great football. He's taken some big hits this year, so we'll see if he can, sustain that. But, at this point, I think they're definitely the best team. Buffalo will be fine. They'll hang in there, but they do have some limitations, and they do have a lot of holes. And when Josh Allen isn't Superman, and he wasn't fully Superman last night, that makes them vulnerable, and that puts them in a spot where they can lose games.
I saw Everett in there in our chat. Thank you guys to everyone that watches the show every day. Give us a like. But I saw Everett saying, no, they're not the best team in the AFC. The Chiefs are not the best team in the AFC. And I'm just point blank. I was like, who is? I guess that's the next buy or sell if you want to go ahead and get that.
Yeah. So next buy or sell here real quickly. The Colts are contenders. What do you think about that?
We're living in the era in the NFL of the rejuvenated quarterback, the guy who failed somewhere else miserably. And I saw this tweet the other day. Daniel Jones, obviously the starting quarterback for the Colts, and they're currently in line to be the number one seed in the AFC. If the season ended today, that's who it would be. The Colts are in line for the number one seed. Sam Darnold and the Seahawks are playing great. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing great. Meanwhile, the teams that drafted them, the Jets, the Panthers, and the Giants, are all in hell. The Colts have a really good roster. They do. They've got great pass rush. They got a good offensive line. They got some good weapons. They got a good coach that I believe in, Shane Steichen. I can't fully. I'll be the first to admit I haven't but watched maybe one game of Danny Dimes this year, Daniel Jones. I can't fully buy in to where this conference has been dominated by quarterback play. And I know I just said these teams that have great quarterbacks, like the Ravens probably won't make the postseason. The Bengals probably won't make the postseason. The Bills and the Chiefs certainly will, and you'll have to go through them. But it's hard for me to imagine the Colts going through Kansas City. It's hard for me. Imagine this. And I know they're playing maybe the best football in the league. They got a high point differential. But just when you do the close your eyes, imagine Daniel Jones beating Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, even if it's at Lucas Oil Stadium. You can't. Imagine Daniel Jones going toe-to-toe with Josh Allen in the playoffs. You can't. You cannot do it. You can maybe close your eyes and imagine that they go toe-to-toe with Bo Nix or Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. You can imagine that. Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, sure. I can imagine that too. You can't close your eyes and imagine a world, even if it's at Lucas Oil Stadium, the Indianapolis Colts beating the Kansas City Chiefs in January. You cannot imagine the Indianapolis Colts and Daniel Jones beating Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in January. So I am selling the Colts are contenders.
Yeah, I have to buy this. To be honest with you, I think sometimes I understand everything you just said, and it's hard when you close your eyes and picture, Danny Dimes, leading this team in the playoffs. And by contenders, we don't mean they're going to win the Super Bowl, but can they mess around, win a playoff game or two, be there at the end? Yeah, I'm going to buy this. I just think sometimes you have to understand what you're seeing out there on the football field. And we're seeing this at the collegiate level right now with the Indiana Hoosiers, right? They were this cute story last year, but they kind of were borderline fraudulent. Right. It was only a matter of time when they played Ohio State that it was going to get ugly, but Indiana this year is totally different. And you have to sit there and look at the Hoosiers and say they could actually win the national title. And the same state here at the professional level with the Colts, I think you have to do that because you look at their team, right? Steichen is an incredible head coach, an incredible play caller. Lou, our guys, doing great things there, calling the shots defensively. They can get after the passer. They got guys that can cover. They stop the run. Then offensively, they got a lot of pieces. That wide receiving core there with Michael Pittman and Downs and Alec Pierce, UC guy, Tyler Warren, Ibuka, if he is out for a few weeks. I mean, Tyler Warren could close that gap on the Rookie of the Year. He's been tremendous at that tight end spot. And, by the way, Taylor, the running back, he's playing as the best running back in the NFL right now. So, and Danny Dimes is playing competent football. It's hard. I get it. It's Daniel Jones, and you're like, what? Contenders? Doesn't really make sense, but they're checking off a lot of boxes, and we'll see how they progress. But as we sit here now, going into week 7, I think you absolutely have to buy this. And, I'm going to say the Colts are contenders here at this point.
They might be the 1 seed. Like, I know they're currently the 1 seed, but they still might hold it at the end of the year. I'm just looking at their schedule. They got a tough game and even a banged up, but they're going to play the Chargers this weekend. And then they got games against the Titans. Obviously, they got to play the Titans again, and Houston twice, Jacksonville twice. Well, I guess they do have a pretty tough schedule there in December. So we'll figure out who this team is. Because coming off their bye, they'll go Kansas City, Houston, Jacksonville, Seattle, San Fran, Jacksonville, Houston. All games that they could very well lose. All games that they could very well win. But right now they're playing great football, and I'll hold the established products over the up-and-comers.
Yeah, that's fair. We need to see a lot more, but I think just where they're at right now, I think you got to buy this, and we'll see if they continue to play good football. Buy or sell. Baker Mayfield will win the NFL MVP.
He's like, if the season ended today, he'd win it, right?
Yep.
He would win it. I know he's not the betting favorite right now because the guys like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes can turn it on. They've obviously won it before. If the season ended today, Baker Mayfield would be your most valuable player. Which, what a turnaround for a career. I don't even remember what he was traded from the Browns to the Panthers, to getting cut by the Panthers, to having that great game on Thursday night where he showed up the day before the game for Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams, and he won the game for them, to now he's absolutely flourishing down in Tampa. But I'm going to sell this. Because I think there's going to be a couple weeks, and I think that they're going to regress a little bit. I still think they're one of the best teams in the league. But I'm going to sell this because if you're giving me the field, it's a numbers game. I know he'd win it. I know he's lead right now. But if you're giving me the field, and the field includes Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and I don't even know who else would be in consideration.
Drake May.
Justin Herbert looked really good for a couple weeks, but that team's kind of floundering. Bijan Robinson. If you want to go running back route, if you're giving me the field or Baker Mayfield, I'll take the field. So that's just a numbers game with it. But you've got to acknowledge what Baker Mayfield's doing. So I'm selling that he'll win the MVP, and it's purely off of just odds, right? It's purely off of odds. And I know I've already done the Chiefs thing, guys. But you got to admit, Patrick Mahomes is probably playing the best football he's played in like 3 years. When you're watching him play, it kind of looks like vintage Patrick Mahomes. So, but I won't do the Chiefs thing anymore. Buy or sell Baker Mayfield winning the MVP?
That's tough. I mean, the way it's worded, like, it makes it tough, and we're sitting here going into, week 7, and there's all these other guys. I'll buy it for now, right?
Okay.
I'll buy it for now.
Okay.
And we're going to find out very quickly, by the way, because Mike Evans is still out. Godwin is out. Abuka's going to be out, and Bucky Irving's going to be out. So all of his top skill guys are out, and if he can keep doing this without those guys, then I definitely think he'll be a borderline shoe-in to win it. But, yeah, Mahomes, man. Nobody's really talking about it. He is the betting favorite right now. Patrick Mahomes is. He is. But I agree. If it ended today, Baker should 100% get that award. But Patrick's really the guy that it's like, well, it's either Baker or Patrick. And if the Chiefs can, keep winning games and they're in it late, maybe they give the nod to Patrick Mahomes. But Baker Mayfield's playing exceptional football. He deserves a lot of credit. How he's revamped his career here in Tampa. It's really inspiring, and it's incredible that he's been able to do it. But those are the two guys to me, Baker and Patrick, but I'll buy it for now.
Easiest guy to root for in the league right now.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Easiest guy to root for. And he wasn't that. He was the easiest guy to root against 4 years ago. Maybe that's just because we're a little vindicated down here in Cincinnati. But, every single press conference, it felt like he was putting his foot in his mouth. Like, he was just an easy guy to hate when he played up in Cleveland. Now he's an incredibly easy guy to root for. Maybe that's just the key to a redemption story. You just go to Tampa Bay, and everyone will flip on what they thought of you. It happened with Tom Brady. It's happening with Baker Mayfield. So maybe that's just the key. You go down to Tampa and you reinvent yourself. I mean, that's why everyone's moving to the Tampa St. Pete area to begin with. Hey, shout out to Abuka, by the way. I know he's banged up right now. I don't know how long he's going to be out, but he looked like a surefire offensive rookie of the year, and I'm happy for Ohio State fans. They finally got someone producing at the NFL level, because for a long time, man, just no one ever comes out of Ohio State and plays well.
Yeah, totally agree with that. All right, final one here before we get out of here. Buy or sell, the Eagles are still elite. Obviously lost on Thursday to Jackson Dart and the Giants on the road.
Man, oh man, are the Philadelphia Eagles the hardest freaking team to pin what the heck they are. Because what they are, on paper, is the most talented team in the league. There's not a single coach or GM or anyone with a brain cell that watches the NFL that wouldn't, if you get your pick of the litter, you can pick any NFL roster, that wouldn't pick the Philadelphia Eagles. There's not a soul that wouldn't pick them. And for the first 4 weeks where they were 4-0, you're like, yeah, here we go. This is that Eagles team. Even though things looked a little weird, like one half the offense wasn't good, one half the defense wasn't good, and you're just like, what's going on with this team? But they were still winning, and you're just like, okay, they're figuring it out. They're just figuring out how to have sustained success, and they still might. But I just think about 2 years ago, they start 10-1, and they lose 6 of the last 7 games, including getting blown out in the postseason. You're like, what the heck happened to this Philadelphia Eagles team? Then they start slow last year, and I'm here sitting on the show going, they should fire Nick Sirianni, and they should hire a new coach right now before this gets out of whack. And what do they do? They rattle off the bye, and they look like the best team that we've seen. This year, just things don't look right. You're hearing all this discord in the locker room. It just feels like watching a soap opera in the NFL. They should have that HBO show, Hard Knocks, and it should just be falling around the Eagles until further notice. Because I just don't know what the heck is going on there, and it might just be like a culmination of that's the energy of the city. That's kind of like how sports radio is, and that's how this teams are. To where like, listen, they could rattle off the next 6 games and win by double digits at each of them, and you wouldn't blink an eye. They could lose 4 of their next 6 games, and I don't think people would bat an eye either. You don't know what the heck the Philadelphia Eagles are, but I'll buy that they're still elite just based off roster talent alone.
They're still good. They're still really good. I mean, I might spin this and say nobody in the NFL is elite right now. I think you could make that argument.
Okay.
I think they'll figure it out. They're going to be a playoff team. I think a lot of us, when we talk about Philly, have a little bit of PTSD from a couple of years ago. Remember, they started 10-1. They were winning all those games and then completely blew up, fell apart. Barely got in the playoffs and then got smacked around when they got there. And then people were like, fire Sirianni, and then they, of course, win the Super Bowl the following year. So definitely not elite, but as you mentioned, the roster, right? I mean, if you can't figure it out with Hurts, that offensive line, Barkley, A.J. Brown, the guys that you have on defense there as well. The secondary does concern me for Philadelphia. You know, Quinyon Mitchell, he got hurt in the game on Thursday night. He's clearly their best cover guy, and if they have to roll out guys like Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson, that ain't going to cut it there. But I still view Philly as a playoff team and a team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs. The tush-push, we're all over it. It all annoys us. And the head coach, I think, it annoys all of us, too, at the same time. So I get the frustration for them. But if they continue to lose, like, they might do something crazy. They might fire somebody or, you know, pull play-calling duties from Patello. Like, I mean, it's the Eagles and it's Philadelphia, and they don't accept this kind of stuff. So I know it's one loss, but it was an ugly one at home against a 22-year-old quarterback. So we'll see. I still think the Eagles are a good football team, and they'll be okay. But, yeah, I don't think they're elite.
Yeah, it's you know, I'm looking at their schedule, and man, when you're the number one team, you just play such a tough schedule. I mean, they've already played the Chiefs, the Rams, and the Bucs in non-divisional games, and they still got to play the Packers, the Lions, the Chargers, the Bills on top of their division, where they still got to go to Dallas. They still have to play the Commanders twice, and they have to play the Giants, who they just lost to. So, I mean, if they don't win both of their next two games, which is at Minnesota and home against New York Giants going into the bye, which even if they split them, they'll be 5-3, which is a fine record going into it. It gets kind of tough after that bye week. Go to Green Bay, home against Detroit, on the road against Dallas. Who knows what the Bears look like, and then the Chargers and Commanders twice, and the Bills. Like that's a tough run. That's a tough run. They'll still make the postseason, though, so you shouldn't be too worried. All right, Stone, thanks. I overran my time once again. Thank you so much for producing. I can't wait to tune into your show as I do every single day. Stone also gave me crap for when he starts talking about not listening to him. He's like, the second I start talking, you just go right to the screen, and it's like, hey man, when you do the show, sometimes you need to unthink. You just need to like debrief for a minute or two. And today I thought I did a better job of taking it. Even though I'm looking over here, I did a better job. So Stone's keeping me honest. You guys keep me honest. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Stone Shield Show coming right up.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. Happy Tuesday to everybody out there. Reed Mouse back on Off the Bench. Certainly appreciate that. Had a great show there the first hour here at Chatterbox Sports, 10 to 11. And now my show here on a Tuesday. Plenty to discuss. As always, hit that thumbs up icon and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Got you covered weekdays, 11 to noon right here at the show. And got an exciting show planned out here on today's edition of the Stone Shield Show. Trey Hendrickson, there's been some dialogue out there, some rumors circulating in the NFL about the Bengals potentially moving off Trey Hendrickson in a trade. We will discuss that, whether I think that would be something wise for Cincinnati to do or whether they should just hold on to him throughout the duration of this season. Also, it is Tuesday. That means it is time for my NFL Power Rankings. We do it every Tuesday here at the show. And seemingly here in 2025, we have had lots of shakeups every single week when it comes to the power rankings. Teams losing. The Bills lose last night. I did not see that coming on the road to Atlanta. They don't look like a great team by any stretch of the imagination. Josh Allen has I'm going to say a bad game, but wasn't Superman in the game, and that certainly cost him and held them back in that game. Got to give a lot of credit to Atlanta for getting that victory. That's a big-time win for them. And defensively, they were flying around making a bunch of plays. So they lose. They're going to fall. The Chiefs obviously pick up a big-time win. They are going to skyrocket up the power rankings. And the Lions, who I had at number 1, but was very cautious about the fact that, they're probably going to lose this game to Kansas City. They'll stick around still in my power rankings, but they're going to drop there as well. And unfortunately, an AFC North team that happens to be leading the division right now is going to debut in my power rankings here, and I think we all know who exactly that is. James Franklin was fired a couple of days ago as the head coach of Penn State. I believe he was in the middle of year 12 or year 14. It was definitely more than 10 years as the head coach of Penn State. And, we're going to roll through some replacements for James Franklin. I think right now, it's clearly the hottest job, right? We'll see if the Florida job ends up becoming open, but I think here this offseason, that's going to be the one. That Penn State job, they've got great tradition there. They've got great legacy there. It's a great home stadium, a great fan base, and they're really trying to elevate, their level of performance as they believe they should be a team that can hang right there with Ohio State and compete. James Franklin wasn't able to get them over the top. They make the move. Crazy how fast things can turn. I'm not shocked that they moved off of him, but I am kind of shocked about when they did it, right? A couple of weeks ago, they're in a situation, a top 10 team at home in Oregon. Great game. They lose it in overtime, and then next thing you know, they drop 2 games after that as 20-plus point favorites, and he gets fired. I think there was a real possibility that if they missed the playoff, they would fire him at the end of the year. I get sort of the timing with, recruits and understanding that, now everybody knows that, hey, this job's going to be open and there's going to be lots of turnover. But it did shock me a little bit that they ultimately made this decision. We will roll through some potential James Franklin replacements here on the show. Also, we'll spend time talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about them in my power rankings. They're 3-3, but I look at the AFC right now and how things sit, and I don't really see a team being quote-unquote better than them. I do have an AFC team above them in the power rankings for now, but you want to talk about December, January football, the way that Mahomes is playing right now, I don't see a team knocking them off, and as Bengals fans, obviously that is a little bit frustrating considering that, they're 3-3, but nobody in the AFC looks to be all that good. So the Chiefs probably will be well on their way to making another deep run in the postseason. MLB playoffs. How about the Seattle Mariners? I did not see that coming. They jumped all over the Blue Jays yesterday, and both those games in Toronto, they're up 2-0 in the ALCS, and then the Dodgers hang on the road against Milwaukee. They win that game 2-1. Crazy double play in that game from Milwaukee. Brewers had a chance there as they scored their 1 run in the 9th, had an opportunity with the guy on third to tie it. Weren't able to do it, and the Dodgers are 1-0 in that series. Game 2 is tonight. Yamamoto and Peralta, I believe, the starters for that. But let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals, and let's start with Trey Hendrickson. There's been some reports, some stuff circulating around, different publications and certainly the internet as well. Boomer Esiason, most recently yesterday, went on the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams and basically said, yep, I think the Cincinnati Bengals should move off of Trey Hendrickson. And then Dianna Russini of The Athletic a couple of days ago wrote that, the 49ers potentially are interested in Trey Hendrickson, and there could be a trade when it relates to that. Basically, my takeaway is this. The Bengals sit here at 2-4 right now. They've got 3 games before the bye. And the first one, obviously, is Thursday night at home in a couple of days. That's going to be very, very exciting. And we'll spend time talking about that matchup over the course of the next 2 days. Then you get the Jets and the Bears after that. You have to go at least 2-1 going into the bye, right? Trade deadline is November 4th, and that kind of is, I believe the bye is on the 8th. Don't quote me on that, but it's right around the trade deadline. So you consider and evaluate your team going into that bye, going into the trade deadline before potentially making a move. And, I think you have to go 2-1 to have a chance here to sit here and say, we're in a spot where we could potentially be hanging around late in the year for a potential Joe Burrow return. You can't go 1-2 or 0-3 over the course of these next 3 weeks. You've lost 4 games in a row as it is. Right? There's a lot of people out there that think this game Thursday night is a must-win. Not going to say that exactly, but I do believe you have to go 2-1 over the course of these next couple of weeks. Now, the Niners certainly should be interested in Trey Hendrickson, and they're a very aggressive organization there. Jed York, their owner, John Lynch, their GM, and I think they understand that they have a really solid football team. They just lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who might be the best team in the NFL, but they have injuries all over the place, right? The injury with Bosa. Now they just lose Fred Warner, their linebacker. Oh, my goodness. He's out. Still one of the best linebackers in professional football, and it'll be interesting to see how aggressive they are. Obviously, Purdy's banged up. They've gone with Mac Jones. He's played well. But if this is a Niners team and an organization who, by the way, is very aggressive, as I just pointed out, I think they still probably believe that they can make a run at this thing, even with losing Bosa and Warner. And, that really is probably the first team that comes to mind when you think about a Trey Hendrickson deal. Obviously, the Bengals did not give him a long-term deal. They gave him the pay raise, $30 million a year. And, I think the whole goal is let's run this thing back one more time with Higgins and Chase and Burrow and see what we can do. Burrow obviously gets hurt right away, and that kind of puts a damper on that plan. But there's no way that Trey Hendrickson is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal next year. I would be flat out shocked if that was the case. We all remember the turmoil that we sat here and discussed it at length for weeks and months on end about, are they going to pay Trey Hendrickson? Oh, it sounds like they're not going to pay Trey Hendrickson. Oh, Trey Hendrickson's pretty ticked off. Oh, he requested a trade. Oh, he's not showing up to these workouts. It was a whole, drama drama-filled offseason for Trey Hendrickson, and I think some people might forget that a little bit, considering, Joe Burrow gets hurt, and then you had these struggles, you're 2-4, but let's not forget what happened here this offseason. It was a mess with Trey Hendrickson, and there's just simply no way, in my mind, that he is back with Cincinnati next year, so the question becomes, are you going to try to get some more from Trey Hendrickson than what you would get if ultimately you don't move him? There's going to be a contender that has interest in Trey Hendrickson. We'll keep an eye on the back situation. Ian Rappaport reported yesterday that he avoided any serious injury, and there's still hope that he could potentially suit up on Thursday against Pittsburgh. Obviously, that would be huge for Cincinnati. But the whole thing, last year or during the offseason when he was requesting a trade was, we view him at such a higher level than we view these draft picks. Well, now that becomes a little bit different here. If you go 1-2 or 0-3 and your season's over going into the bye, well, then you need to stockpile your draft picks a little bit. Mind you already lost one with the Joe Flacco trade, and you've got holes all over this team. And, on the offensive line, certainly, and all across the defense, you can get better at all those spots. Now, some people might say, well, we're just going to pick the wrong guys. Fair, but there's no real, other option. You need to load up on those draft picks, and you eventually have to hit in one of these drafts. This is a Bengals organization that in years past has shown the ability to draft well, but over the course of the past few years have drafted very, very poorly. And you see it in the NFL all the time. You have 2 good drafts in a row or even 1 great draft, boom, you're right back in a good spot with a bunch of young talent and guys that you aren't paying a ton of money. Seattle, right, is a prime example. What they've done over the course of the past 2 years defensively in the draft, they're excellent. And then they hit in free agency with the quarterback and Sam Darnold, and they look very much like a playoff team right now. The Rams, same division there in the NFC West, did it for years, with Les Snead and Sean McVay and those guys calling the shots. That defense, remember they win the Super Bowl, and then next year they're just bad, and then boom, they're right back to being really good because they hit on all those picks on the defensive side of the ball and rework the offensive line. And, they're a perennial team now in the National Football League. Eventually, the Bengals are going to have to do that again, right? No matter what they do in free agency or any trades that they made, that's only going to take you so far. In this league, you have to draft well, and you have to get guys that can contribute to your football team on rookie deals when you're not paying them a ton of money. And that's how, that's a recipe for success for you in the National Football League. So the Bengals, if they're eliminated, they're not going to technically be eliminated from the postseason here. But again, if they're 1-2 or 0-3, you can stick a fork in them because they aren't going to make the playoffs. Then you need to look at stockpiling some draft picks and moving off Trey Hendrickson. Now Reed brought up a good point there on off the bench. He says you should do it right now because he thinks you could potentially get a second round pick if you do it now. I just don't think you can punt on the season here in this situation right after you made a move for Joe Flacco. Right, if you had rolled Jake Browning out there again in the Green Bay game and it looked awful again, then I would have a different viewpoint. But you just kind of reshaped your organization right here. You went and you made a move with a quarterback. You can't do that and then immediately trade Trey Hendrickson. That wouldn't make any type of sense. Again, if you kept Browning, then I'd be fine to deal him right now. But considering you just made a move for a quarterback, you just played, in my opinion, still one of the best teams in the National Football League. We'll get to them in my power rankings. The Packers, they check a lot of boxes for you. They're real threats. The loss against Cleveland, certainly a concern, and the tie against Dallas, certainly a concern. It's just the nature of this league, though. It happens, right? You lose some games you shouldn't lose, right? That's just kind of the NFL. But the Packers are a really, really good team, right? And the fact that the Bengals lost this game to the Packers, I predicted before the year that they would lose this game even with Joe Burrow. So I don't think you should, full-blown panic after losing this game right after you trade it for a quarterback, right? It wouldn't make sense to me to move him at this point. Does the value go down as you get closer to the deadline? Maybe, right? I already think it's a bit of a stretch that you could even get a second-round pick for Hendrickson now. I think third or fourth round is, more likely for Trey Hendrickson. But we'll see. I think it's definitely something the Cincinnati Bengals should be open to. Typically, we would sit here and say, well, the Bengals don't make in-season trades, and there's absolutely no way that they would move Trey Hendrickson. Well, they've made two in the past 2 years here, obviously, with Flacco here last week, and then, of course, Khalil Herbert last year at the deadline, bringing him in at that running back spot. So who knows? I think if something is there and they have an opportunity to add a draft pick or two or maybe a young player, they will do that. And a team like San Francisco is going to be aggressive, right? A team like Howie Roseman in Philadelphia, would that surprise you at all if he made a move to try to get Trey Hendrickson? Absolutely not. And if things look ugly here against Pittsburgh, maybe you take some calls now. But I think going into the bye week, you're really going to have to reevaluate a lot of things. And I hate to say this personally. I know some people out there will love that I'm saying this. But if you get blown out over the course of these next 3 weeks again, right? And that would include a loss to the winless New York Jets. You might be thinking about making a trade, but also making some changes on your coaching staff as well. I personally hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it will happen, considering what you saw in the second half against Green Bay and what you've seen from a defensive standpoint throughout the course of the year. Look, I know there's some people out there that are still freaking out about the defense and say the defense stinks. I hear you. I get that. But let's be very clear. If Joe Burrow was the quarterback of this team right now, this defense would be good enough. What they've been able to do. If Joe Burrow's out there playing at the level in which he played last year, this defense would be good enough. So I understand they couldn't get off the field in the second half against Green Bay. I understand they've given up a lot of points, but they have significantly improved from last year's group. And to me, that's very, very obvious. And to you as a fan, that should be quite obvious there as well. But to kind of put a bow on that, Boomer, Dianna, Russini talking about potentially moving Trey Hendrickson, I think it's something that should be considered. Last year I was like, absolutely not, because you had Joe Burrow playing quarterback. But if you go into this bye here with 2 losses, all right, over the course of these next 3 games, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Jets, and the Chicago Bears, 2 of those games have to be won. Don't care which 2 they are, but if you don't win 2 of those games, your season is over, and that bye ends up timing out pretty much right around the trade deadline. Then I'm looking to move Trey Hendrickson. And at that point, you're kind of just moving him for whatever you can get. And it might not be much. It might not be much, but you have to understand that the mindset here going into the year was that this was Trey Hendrickson's last year anyway, right? So if you're in a spot where you're basically eliminated from the postseason, it doesn't really make that much of a difference in my mind. And if you can get even a late round pick, you make the move and you move on. but obviously the season hasn't worked out the way Zach Taylor and many people around the organization and certainly the fan base was hoping coming into this 2025 campaign. All right, NFL Power Rankings. We do it every Tuesday here on the show. Lots of shakeup in this week's power rankings. Absolutely no doubt about that. Again, the Bills lose last night. The Commanders lose last night. A game-winning field goal from Chicago. Moody, the guy that gets cut by San Francisco, comes in, hits the game winner. Certainly exciting for him. Big moment for him as he tries to revitalize his career. But, Caleb Williams makes a few more plays than Daniels there for Washington. Washington clearly, coming back down to life here. I'm not going to sit here and say it was a fluke that they made the conference championship last year, but to sit here and think that they were going to be some perennial power in the NFL, that was a bit extreme. They're still a solid football team, but, that's a loss against a Bears team that needed that win really, really bad. And obviously I just mentioned that the Bengals are going to have to deal with the Bears here in a little bit. But without further ado, let's get into our power rankings. I've been avoiding putting them here for quite some time, right? Because the level of competition that they have faced is not extreme, and the level of offensive football that they have played to this point hasn't knocked your socks off. But Pittsburgh with one loss. Aaron Rodgers is playing at a really, really high level. They belong on this list. They are the front runners, obviously, in the AFC North, and they're really going to separate themselves from the rest of the pack if they pick up a victory at Paycor Stadium on Thursday Night Football. But, I sat here at the very beginning of the year, and I said, watch out, because Aaron Rodgers might be old. He might be a little prickly. He might say some things that rub you the wrong way to the media. He might throw some teammates under the bus, but he can still play quarterback at the professional level at a high level, right? And you're seeing him do that right now. He's kind of retooled his game a little bit. Rodgers has always been a guy that doesn't throw interceptions and is very careful with the football. But, the big play hasn't really been there for Pittsburgh, and they haven't really tried to force it either. It's a lot of back shoulder stuff to DK on the sidelines, lots of quick stuff over the middle. They're trying to run the ball. They haven't ran the ball great. The offensive line has been, Tomlin hasn't been able to get the offensive line right for several years, but it's hanging in there. The big knock on Rodgers for me, or I shouldn't say the knock, but the big question mark was, is he going to be able to get through the season? Because if he gets through the season, Pittsburgh's a playoff team. I said that going into the year, and, so far so good. He's been able to stay upright here. I'm sure he's got his bumps and bruises as he has taken some shots, but that's a good head coach. Like him or not, Mike Tomlin knows what he's doing, and that is a future Hall of Fame quarterback who, despite the fact he's 40-plus years of age, can't move around the same way he once did. He can still play the position at a really high level. He's one of the most cerebral guys to ever play the position. Obviously, I've tried to keep them off this list for as long as I can, but Pittsburgh belongs on this list. They beat up on the Browns. Congrats, but, they only have one loss, and I've been really impressed with Aaron Rodgers. At number 9, I still have the Philadelphia Eagles. I had them all the way up at number 2 last week, and of course I had them at number 1 for the majority of the year to this point. They lose on Thursday Night Football to Jackson Dart. That's a lot of youth on that team with him and Scadaboo, and they looked completely outmatched in that game. They were out-physicaled. I think the biggest takeaway and the most concerning aspect of that game, if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan, is the fact that New York kind of beat them at their own game. They kind of punched them in the mouth and controlled the line of scrimmage and bullied them a little bit, and usually that does not happen at all for Philadelphia Eagles teams. They're going to be okay. They're going to be fine. I mentioned this on Off the Bench. There's a PTSD element involved when you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles because of what happened 2 years ago when they started the season 10-1, and then they went on this horrible run where they barely back into the playoffs, and then they get blown out immediately. And you're talking about Sirianni potentially getting fired, and then they kind of obviously put that fire out by following up the next year and winning the World Championship. But I think that's part of the reason why people get so worked up about the Eagles. And also it's Philadelphia, right? It's a crazy fan base. It's an organization where, failure is something that is not okay. It is not something that is accepted. And don't be surprised here if they drop another game over the course of the next few weeks, if somebody gets fired, if they pull the play calling from Patello, or you see a trade from Howie Roseman. I mean, this kind of stuff doesn't fly. They were favorites there in that game. They needed a get-right game, despite the fact they had been winning. They needed to look good doing it, and they weren't able to do it. If there's anybody that can navigate the chaos of Philadelphia, it is Jalen Hurts. He will be just fine. Does he have some limitations? I mean, he's not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. We all understand that, but he's still an elite quarterback. So the people that bang on him, I don't really get that. There's obviously some turmoil there with not Saquon Barkley, but A.J. Brown. Saquon Barkley doesn't. He's not running as well as he did last year, but he took the workload he had last year was immense, and he took a lot of shots. And that's just kind of, what happens for a running back after you take on a year like he did last year. My biggest questions for them is what's happening in the secondary, because Quinyon Mitchell got hurt in the game against New York, and really that should be the biggest takeaway because he's a really, really good player out of Toledo, a great cover guy, their best one. And they've got Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson. They're on the outside for Philadelphia, and those guys are simply not good. Don't be surprised if Howie trades for a corner here at some point. I think he will before the deadline. I think Philadelphia is going to be fine, but they're clearly not a top 5 team in the NFL at this point. And neither is the Buffalo Bills. How about that? They get upset in the game last night, and it's a team, I've said it for years, they're very Josh Allen reliant, and when he isn't magnificent, they look average at best. They look mediocre, and you could even argue they look a little bit worse than that. They've got holes there on that defense. It was a question mark early in the year when they gave up all those points to Baltimore early on. They've really struggled on the defensive side of the football. And then you look at that wide receiver core, and you're like, well, the only guy that he trusts out there right now is Khalil Shakir, who's a good player, but, if that's your one, that's kind of an issue. So from a skill player perspective, they need more guys to step up. And, they haven't, run the football really well. And I think over the course of the past 2 years when Buffalo's really taken that next step and has been a really, elite football team, they've been able to run the ball. And they've really struggled at that this year as well. Again, as long as Josh Allen is upright, there'll always be a chance and they'll always be scary in the conference. But again, you can't sit there and look at this Bills team and say they're a top 5 team. Atlanta, credit to them. They've got some really good young players, but Atlanta's not a playoff team, and they absolutely dominated that game from start to finish. Congratulations to them on that victory, but I've got the Bills sliding down to number 8 after I had them at number 4 last week. This was kind of inevitable. I knew that. The Chiefs game on Sunday night was one of our best bets of the weekend. That was probably one of my favorite bets of the entire year to this point. So I knew the Lions at number 1 was going to be something that was short-lived. Look, they can run the football really well. We all understand that. Jared Goff's playing at a really high level for Detroit. He's playing like certainly a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League here at this point, but they've got questions on the back end of their defense. Honestly, very similar to what you have going on in Philadelphia. Those corners are not very good. They were without Arnold in the game, but even when he's out there, he certainly has struggled a lot. And then you have Brian Branch and Kirby, the safety and the nickel there. They were banged up in the game against Kansas City. They were able to play, and then Brian Branch obviously loses his mind after the game. Now he's going to get suspended. That is just stupidity there at its finest there from Brian Branch. So I've got some serious questions on the back end of that defense. Patrick Mahomes lit them up. Joe Burrow would have lit them up the previous week had he been out there quarterbacking the Cincinnati Bengals. But Detroit, what they have offensively, their new play caller, he has settled in. They can run the ball. Goff's really good. I don't have concerns about them scoring points at all. But they might find themselves in a lot of shootouts here over the course of the next few weeks and months. And if that's how you have to win going into the postseason, that certainly is a massive red flag if that's what you have to do. The Rams I have at number 6. I had them at 9 last week, and they get bumped up here. They beat Baltimore, and it looked a lot harder than it should have, right? Baltimore's been one of the worst defenses in the National Football League, and they only scored 17 points, and it took them a while to get things going. Now you have Nakua. He's going to be out for a little bit. I thought the Rams would have played cleaner football here to this point. You kind of saw it, though, early in the year last year, where it's like he expected this team to be really good, and it's like, okay, they're winning, but it's not, they're not doing it with flying colors necessarily, right? And they do have, a couple of bad losses on the year, games in which they had control that they weren't able to finish out. I still view them as a threat, especially with Stafford if he's healthy late in the year. I thought we would have seen more from Los Angeles to this point, but just because of the fact that, teams around them are losing as it relates to the top teams in the National Football League, and they're still, finding ways to win games, obviously, for the most part. They get bumped up here a little bit, but I'm still not as high on the Rams as I necessarily expected coming into the year. All right, now we're going to get a little bit crazy here. Yep, you see that correctly. I've got the New England Patriots all the way up at number 5 in my power rankings. They've been unranked the whole year, and now they jump all of those teams up to that number 5 spot. Drake May, there's some value in him winning the most valuable player. I'm not suggesting you go out there and do it. I still think it's a Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes award this year. But Drake May, there is certainly some value in that. He is playing at an unbelievable level. The year two leap that he has made is tremendous. Mike Vrabel, I mean, the fact that the Tennessee Titans fired him, my goodness, what a disaster of a decision that was. Obviously, he wasn't a head coach last year. He spent some time on the Browns staff, but clearly was the hottest candidate in this year's head coaching cycle. There was absolutely no way he wasn't going to succeed in New England. The culture that he's been able to build is tremendous. Clearly his players love him, and they've got a lot of talent around Drake May, and Drake May has the ability to elevate players around him. You talk about that with great quarterbacks. Yeah, can you succeed with great talent around you like a Brock Purdy, like some of these guys in the league can? Okay, fine. But if you have, I'm not going to say suspect talent, but just not elite talent around you, can you elevate those guys? Kayshon Boutte was a guy that we all wrote off and was like, oh, this guy's not any good. Well, next thing you know, he's got Drake May throwing him the football, and he seems pretty good. Stephon Diggs obviously was tremendous for a long time, and then, the past couple of years haven't been the best, really, since he left Buffalo, and then here we go this year. He looks like a really good receiver still in the National Football League. Same with Hunter Henry there at that tight end spot. Yeah, he was good in L.A. Yeah, Mac Jones there, that rookie year was getting him the football, but after that it wasn't much. Oh, he looks like a really good tight end there as well. You're starting to see a little bit more from them in the run game. That's got to get better, by the way, for them to take that next step. But I have been really impressed with Drake May. They sit at 4-2. Their schedule is weak. And this is a team that's going to rattle off some wins. And if Buffalo continues to struggle, maybe they could potentially mess around and win that division and have an opportunity to have a home playoff game. But the Patriots clearly are a playoff team for me right now. Did not take long at all for Mike Vrabel to steer that ship in the right direction. And Drake May, how can you not love that guy? He's got all the tools. He's got the maturity. He's got the leadership at the podium. And, people kind of wrote him, I'm not going to say wrote him off, but people are like, oh, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, even Michael Penix, right? Bo Nix, right? Nobody was talking about Drake May there in that class, and he has done a tremendous job so far this year. I've got the Patriots all the way up at number 5. At number 4, welcome back, Kansas City. I had them ranked for much of the year, and then I dropped them out of the rankings after their Monday night loss to Jacksonville, and now they have skyrocketed all the way up to that number 4 spot. Said it earlier in the show. You look at the state of the AFC right now, there's some decent teams there at the top, but who do you really trust beating the Chiefs in December and January? I don't know if there's anybody that you can simply point to in that spot. Mahomes is playing the best he's looked over the past few years. Oh, by the way, what has he done over the past few years? Gone to Super Bowls and win them there as well. So, the fact he's playing at this level is tremendous. He's taken a lot of hits this year, more so than he typically does. We'll see if he can sustain that a little bit, but he's going to get Rashee Rice back here soon. Kelsey still showed some things there in the game against Detroit. Pacheco was a slow start for him. He had some success on the ground. Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith, Xavier Worthy. Next thing you know, Rashee Rice kind of enters back into that situation, and you go, oh, wow, this is a really good offense, and obviously Andy Reid is calling the shots. The fact that the AFC looks really, really weak, all us Bengals fans are sitting here kind of rejoicing a little bit because of it. But that means that the Kansas City Chiefs are absolutely licking their chops right now. I think that's what they're doing. And, got them all the way up at that number 4 spots. At number 3, I get it that they lost to Cleveland on the road, right? When the wind's whipping like that in that stadium, it's kind of a weird place to play, and, they didn't get things going there offensively. I'm not giving them a pass for that. Dallas, Dak Prescott has scored a lot of points. I view that as a fluky game for the defense of Green Bay. It's a really good team. They're coached really well. Jordan Love is a really tremendous quarterback. If he wasn't such a good quarterback, by the way, the Bengals might have been able to win that game, but just even when they were able to get pressure on Love with bringing 4, he would find a way to use his legs and extend, and then LaFleur in the second half did a tremendous job of, kind of opening up the quick passing game, getting the ball out of his hands quickly. I picked Green Bay to go to the Super Bowl before the year, and then they have the weird loss and the weird tie and then the bye, and you're sitting there going, what's up here with the Packers? Yeah, they're going to be just fine. I've got no worries with them whatsoever. Tucker Kraft, great tight end. Golden, you saw him get going against the Bengals, obviously. And, you've got other guys there in that receiving room that can do some good things. Dobbs is just a kind of reliable guy. And Josh Jacobs, you could argue he's running the ball second best in the National Football League right now behind the guy in Indianapolis. We'll talk about him in a second. But Green Bay, I just view those now as kind of fluky games. It's going to happen in the National Football League, but Green Bay is a really, really good football team, and I've got them at number 3. At number 2, how about it? Who would have thought the Indianapolis Colts check in at this number 2 spot? We talked about them on Off the Bench. They just check a lot of boxes. And the argument I was making is this. Sometimes you just have to admit that a team is really, really good. And I get it. You want to close your eyes and sit here and have Daniel Jones competing in an AFC championship. You're like, there's absolutely no way that can happen. But you just have to believe your eyes. Believe what you're seeing. Right? You're seeing it at the collegiate level with the team in that same state, the Indiana Hoosiers. It's not last year, right? It's not just some cute story where they're going in here winning some games against bad teams. No, the Hoosiers are legitimate national title contenders. And am I going to sit here and say the Colts are legitimate Super Bowl contenders here at this point? I'm not ready to say that. But they're legitimately a very, very good football team, and you've kind of got to have them in the top 5. Am I a little bit aggressive here with the 2 spot? Maybe, but I think if you're doing these, and obviously everybody does these power rankings, you have to have them in the top 5. Another impressive win. Obviously, you're going against a backup quarterback and Brissett at home. I understand that, but offensively, you made the plays. That's a really good wide receiver core, right? When you're talking about Pittman Jr., Downs is incredible. Alec Pierce out of UC. Emeka Egbuka, obviously, is the front runner for the offensive rookie of the year, but he's banged up. He might miss some games. Tyler Warren's going to have an opportunity to close that gap. He's been tremendous at that tight end spot for Indianapolis, and they're running the football better than anybody. Jonathan Taylor, how about it? He is doing a tremendous job, toting the rock for Indianapolis. And Lou Anarumo, he's calling the right shots on defense. We all expected him to land on his feet there, and he's got some veteran guys on that group, and they're making a ton of plays for him. So I need to see more, obviously, as time goes on for the Colts, but based on what they've done to this point, I've got them at number 2. And at number 1, that leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've been very high on Tampa. I said don't be surprised coming into the year if they're competing in the NFC Championship. Baker Mayfield is playing at such a high level. Right now, it feels like the MVP is a 2-horse race between him and Mahomes. If the season ended today, I would give it to him. Going to be interesting to see how good Baker is because he's going to miss Evans. Godwin's hurt. Bucky Irving's hurt. And now Emeka Egbuka is hurt. So he's going to be dealing with a lot of backups here in the foreseeable future. We'll see how he's able to elevate those guys. But, just the run that he had on that 3rd and long against the Niners where it looks like he's going to get sacked. He gets out of it. He's going down the sideline. He makes a juke, and it's like, oh, he's going to get tackled a yard short. And then he stretches the ball out and gets it. He is just playing at an absurd level right now. What a story, Baker Mayfield. I get early in the year and for much of these games, or maybe even all of these games besides the Niner game this past week, very reliant on the game-winning field goal and the game-winning drive. I don't know if that's something you can continue to bank on necessarily, but based on what's going on around the league, good teams are losing games. I think you have to put Tampa Bay at number 1 despite those injuries, and such an easy team to root for, too. Baker's such an easy guy to root for there as well, and I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've been higher on most throughout the duration of the season here to this point, and now I'm ready to put them at that number 1 spot. So those are our power rankings here going into week number 7. As always, get in the comments section. Let me know what you guys think about that. Obviously, there's going to be some teams that you thought should have been in there that aren't. I know a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, you're a little bit crazy there for that New England there all the way at number 5. But I'm telling you, man, Drake May is the real deal. And dark horse MVP guy right now. If Mahomes or Baker, one of those guys, get hurt, slip up, start losing games, check that schedule for New England. Check that schedule because it is very, very favorable. And, knocking off Buffalo, that kind of just opened up a whole new avenue and a whole new door for them to walk through, right? Because, I didn't expect them to beat the Bills. And then I thought they would get a little bit hot after that. But then they beat the Bills. And, of course, they win again this week against the Saints. They're 4-2. That's a good football team. The Broncos, I had at 7 last week. I dropped them off. They're going to have an opportunity to get back on. I still believe in them. That defense is really good, and really everything on that team is good except Bo Nix is taking a step back. He's taking a step in the wrong direction. I think Sean Payton will get that figured out, but if you're going to beat the Jets by 2 points and only score 13 points, I just can't put you on this list. Is the Jets are just absolutely abysmal and clearly the worst team in the NFL. So that's why the Broncos got knocked off. All right, James Franklin, he was fired a couple of days ago. I believe it was on Sunday. He got fired. Just crazy how this works. I can't really think of another time in my life where something like this happened where I was just this stunned. Like, I mean, I get it, right? And I thought, if he continued to lose, there was a good chance that he was going to get fired. I never thought he was the guy, right? I mean, I think we've all known that for a really long time. And, Penn State seemingly every single year, the media wants to act like they're this top 5 team, and you're just like, what? And even this year, it got even more extreme. There was people saying they might be the best team coming into the year, and it just, it really makes you scratch your head. He's been there for a long time. He's won a lot of games. He just couldn't obviously win the big game. Only had the one win, I believe, against Ohio State in 2016. That was borderline lucky. Ohio State has, dominated James Franklin. But you're in a spot a couple of weeks ago. College game day is there at your whiteout. The Penn State whiteouts, supposedly, and I believe it too, one of the best traditions and one of the best environments in college football. And then you're up against an Oregon team who at the time, I thought was the second best team in the country. They're going to get knocked down a little bit. We'll talk about the Oregon Ducks tomorrow on our show. But that game goes into overtime, and then you barely lose that game, right? And then you're like, okay, whatever. Penn State probably still a playoff team. And then they go across the country to UCLA and lose. By the way, that game wasn't really close. UCLA jumped on them early, and it's like, whoa. What in the world happened there? And then you follow it up by losing at home to Northwestern. Your quarterback gets hurt, and then boom, you get fired. All that in a span of 2 weeks, right? You're looking at a team that potentially could win a national championship, or people are acting like they could win a national championship. You got game day there, sold out, white out. The vibes around the team are great. And then 2 weeks later, you are gone. And I just can't remember anything happening like that in my lifetime. But we're going to go through some potential replacement guys. I think there's 4 guys that you should view, that you're picking up the phone, you're trying to talk to these guys, and they should be your 4 priorities, right? And then beyond that, there's one guy that I think is a dream situation, but it isn't going to happen. So we'll break down that name. And then there's 2 names that are going to be candidates that Penn State is going to call and going to interview and going to have interest in that are a mistake. And then there's one final guy that Joel Klatt mentioned, and I know there's a lot of Ohio State people in here, so we're going to discuss him and how interesting that would be if this particular individual were to get the head job at Penn State. But let's start with the 4 guys, and this is the name that everybody is throwing around right now. This would be the home run hit. This would be the splash hire that really, makes a big wave, right? If you are Penn State, that obviously is Curt Signetti. Hottest name in college football right now, especially on the heels of what he was able to accomplish at Autzen Stadium this past week. His team goes on the road to a place where nobody wins, by the way. Even Ohio State, as great as they were last year, they couldn't even win at Autzen Stadium in Oregon. And you win that game, and it was 30-20, but you punched them in the mouth throughout the duration of that football game. You were the more disciplined football team. You were the tougher football team. You were the more buttoned-up football team. You were the more complete football team. You were the better coached football team in that game. That was an Oregon team that I thought was the second best team in the country, mind you, at their place, and you went in and did that. Signetti, he's a great coach. You got to give him credit. He's won everywhere he's been, as he likes to point out. He won at James Madison, and of course he's winning now at Indiana. Another one of those Saban guys, right? He was on a Saban staff. Certainly you see some qualities there when you see him coach, but the big question is he going to leave Indiana? And I don't know if he will, and my gut tells me right now that he won't. That's what my gut says. Gut obviously has been wrong multiple times in the past, but Indiana's funding him, right? And that's, I think, a big storyline here is they're helping him out there with that football program. Indiana, obviously, historically a basketball school, but I think they understand, their AD understands what they've got going here, and they're going to continue to help him. And I think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure he stays here. He is from Pennsylvania. Again, he wins everywhere he goes. If you make that hire, if you're Penn State, you feel like, oh, it's a new day, and here we go, right? Now, he is a very ambitious guy. He was at James Madison and then Indiana, and as much as I think he loves his team in Indiana, I think as much as he loves that university, he understands that the Penn State job is a step up from that, right? I think when you're looking at the Big Ten, or I should say like the old Big Ten without, like Oregon and UCLA and USC and those teams, when you're looking at like the old Big Ten, I think Ohio State, is the best job, right? It's definitely the most stressful job, but it's probably the best job, right? And then you can throw probably Michigan up there, but I think Penn State belongs in that group. Like, that's a good job. It's a school with a lot of tradition, lots of legacy. You know, they got the whiteout, they got a really nice stadium that they're revamping, by the way. They've got a good AD by all accounts. So I think Signetti is probably the top priority, but the question is, would he leave Indiana? Beyond that, Matt Rule, right? Matt Rule is the head coach, of course, at Nebraska. He's bounced around a little bit. You know, he was at Baylor, had that stint with the Panthers in the NFL, and now he's the head man at Nebraska. His alma mater is Penn State, so that right there is like, well, that's, you know, pretty obvious. And, you know, he was asked about the job, and I thought it was very interesting kind of how he handled those questions. I would encourage you to go look at that clip when he was asked, because he goes on this like long thing about how much he loves Penn State and how he feels for James Franklin. He loves his alma mater, and he called it his alma mater like a couple of times, but then ends it saying he's fully focused on what's going on here at Nebraska. I think there was a couple of different ways he could have navigated that to, you know, reassure the people of Nebraska that he definitely didn't want the job. I think he very much left that door open. And, you know, again, it's his alma mater. I would assume he wants that job. I mean, Nebraska, you know, they fill out that stadium. That's a great fan base. And, you know, I think there is something to kind of bringing back Nebraska football to national relevance. This is once a very, very proud college football program, and I do believe he wants to do that. But just based on hearing him talk about Penn State, I mean, it was kind of a love story that he was kind of, you know, relaying there to the media. So I think he's going to remain loyal, obviously, to Nebraska now and his team now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he jumped ship and tried to go to Penn State, and that certainly is another name that is at the top of the list there for Penn State. And then two more names. This is the guy that you know, I probably would hire, to be honest with you, if you can't get Signetti, and that's Brent Key of Georgia Tech. He's the head coach there. Now, I do want to be very clear. I think Georgia Tech as a football team right now is very overrated. You know, where they're ranked, they're not nearly that good. I get they beat Clemson, but, you know, Clemson, are they any good? Right, probably not, right? They've lost several games. Hayden King's great. I love watching him. He's a tough, physical guy. At the end of the day, I just don't think Georgia Tech has the funding and the talent, right? I think you'll see that as they progress. Obviously, a weak conference. But they just don't have enough good players. Haynes King's tremendous. He's really tough, but they don't have enough good players. And Brent Key, I think, is a really good coach. I think he can establish a really good culture. I don't know if this would be like a sexy hire, right? But I think he could go into Penn State, elevate that program, and win. This is a guy that can win big games. This is a guy that has really tough, physical, hard-nosed football teams. And he has football teams that are really disciplined there as well. And I think Penn State is kind of lacking some of that. And also, he's an aggressive guy. You know, I think you could argue that James Franklin, one of the biggest issues with him during his tenure at Penn State is he came into these games with the mindset of trying not to lose rather than go out there and win these games. And I think that bit him in the rear end several times throughout his tenure at Penn State. He's a younger guy, 47 years of age, has the experience as the head guy at Georgia Tech, and another one of those Saban guys, right? He's been around. He was Alabama's offensive line coach, I think, for 3 years, and was a part of a national championship there with that group, was at UCF there before it. I think he's ready for an even bigger job, to be honest with you. And Brent Key, to me, if you can't get Signetti, is I think the guy that you should be going after. I really have a lot of respect for Brent Key, and I think he would do a tremendous job as the head coach at Penn State. And then the final guy on this list of four of who I think the top four guys should be is Clark Lee. And Clark Lee is, you know, the head coach at Vanderbilt, and he's done a tremendous job. He's been there since 21. It wasn't the greatest start, but these past 2 years with Diego Pavia, I mean, that's the toughest place to win in the SEC. Right? I mean, you could maybe throw Kentucky in there, but Vanderbilt football, man, was a disaster for such a long time. And to be able to come in there and kind of reinstate them to national prominence, I get they lost to Bama a couple of weeks ago, but Vandy's a top 20 team. If you watch them play, they are absolutely a top 20 team. Clark Lee's done a tremendous job. You know, there's questions, how high can you take that program, right? Can you elevate it more than where it's at right now? Like, can Vandy really be a team that goes out there and wins a national title? I don't know. I think Clark Lee might have that. program at its ceiling right now. I don't know if it can get higher than that, and obviously Penn State would be a significant jump up for him as well. He's even younger than Key. He's only 43 years of age, so he's a young guy. He was the DC at Notre Dame for several years, did a tremendous job there, and that's another guy. I think I kind of go back and forth, like Clark Lee or Brent Key, like which of the two would you go with? Kind of a coin flip. I lean Key a little bit over Lee. Those rhyme, obviously, that gets a little bit confusing. But Clark Lee's a tremendous coach, done a tremendous job at Vanderbilt. By the way, he filled in for James Franklin, because Franklin, of course, was the head guy at Vanderbilt, and then he takes the Penn State job. And then, that's eventually gets taken over there by Clark Lee. So those are those four guys that I think should be the top priorities, right? Signetti, obviously, is the hottest name right now. Rule is a guy that it just makes sense. Again, it's like basically seemed like he kind of wanted the job, despite the fact he was saying he was fully focused on what was going on at Nebraska. And then Brent Key and Clark Lee, Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. Those are the top four for me. I think if you hire one of those four guys, you made a great decision. If you're Penn State. And then another guy to kind of monitor as well, who's kind of that next guy for me. I don't put him in the same category as those top four, but he is on that next guy for me. That's Dan Mullen. To be completely honest with you, Dan Mullen has done a tremendous job at UNLV this year. They haven't lost a football game yet. He was out of coaching for several years. He was on TV working for ESPN. Obviously has a long run as a head coach. Was at Mississippi State for a while. Won a lot of games there, and then eventually left for Florida. And I don't think that was entirely his fault how things ended. It didn't end well at Florida. Let's be very, very clear. It ended very, very badly. But you look at Billy Napier, like how much better has he been, right? He hasn't done much there at all. I think Dan Mullen's ready for another big time job. To be honest with you, I wouldn't take him over the four guys that I just mentioned, but nobody's really talking about Dan Mullen as a potential candidate for Penn State, and that's an interesting one to monitor. I would have them there at that fifth spot. A dream name that's been thrown around a lot is Mike Elko, but he's not leaving A&M, right? So, they're paying him way too much money. He's got way too much funding. In the SEC, like that would make no sense for Mike Elko to leave Texas A&M. I think if you somehow can get him, if you're Penn State, that is. I talked about Signetti being a home run. If you can get Mike Elko, that's a out of the park home run, right? But I just don't think that's realistic at all. You try to get him, right? But I just don't think there's any way that he would leave A&M, especially with what he's done. And that's a top 4 team in the country right now at A&M. The money that they have is insane. The stadium that they have is insane. It just would be a step in the wrong direction for him. But certainly do everything you can and call. And then two guys that I think are going to be in the mix that I don't think should be in the mix. Number one is Manny Diaz, right? I don't think, what does he give you that James Franklin didn't, right? He was the DC there for a couple of years recently. He, of course, was the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes for a while. That didn't go well. Now he's at Duke as the head coach, and he's doing a good job there for Duke. I will give him credit there. But if you fire James Franklin for Manny Diaz, what did you do as a program? You fired him, and then you're just going to do the same thing and just be mediocre. And I just don't. Manny Diaz, I don't get that at all. I think they need to rebrand a little bit, a different guy, a younger guy, a guy that's they got to go in a different direction here. You can't just fire him and then kind of do the same thing. And I think that's kind of what you got if you go with Manny Diaz. I think that would be a tremendous mistake. And then Matt Campbell is the other guy that I have paired in this twosome here at the end of the guys that are going to be in the mix that I don't think necessarily should be. I view Matt Campbell totally differently than Manny Diaz. I've got a lot of respect for Matt Campbell. He's done a tremendous job at Iowa State. It's kind of an annual thing, right? When a job opens up, you got to throw Matt Campbell's name in the hat, right? We do this every single time a job opens up. I just don't know if that's, again, kind of similar to the Diaz thing. I think he would do a much better job than Manny Diaz, but I don't know if he does enough. I don't know if it's as big of a splashy hire or as big of a change in direction if you bring in Matt Campbell. I think he would do okay there, and I think the world of him as the coach at Iowa State. He's done tremendous stuff, but I'd probably stay away from Matt Campbell there as well. And then the final guy, and this is interesting, Joel Klatt brought this up on his show as a guy that would be a top candidate for him for the Penn State job, and that is Brian Hartline. And that is very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of Ohio State people that watch this show. Look, Hartline is, him and Ryan Day, what they do recruiting is insane, right? From a play calling perspective this year for Ohio State, there's been some good things, right? Is it as good as Chip Kelly last year? No, but it's still, a feeling out process. We'll see if they find themselves in like a close game, right? I mean, I get the Texas game was kind of close, but there was a clear blueprint there if they were just going to keep it close to the vest and make it so they weren't going to make a mistake and let their defense win the game, basically. So we haven't really seen, Hartline in a high leverage situation as a play caller. As a recruiter, he's tremendous. Clearly the best wide receiver coach in the country. All the receivers that have come through Ohio State, tremendous. And, there was some buzz around him in the past. I think it was the Boston College job that there were some connections with there from him. He said that at some point he would like to be a head coach, and I think he will be a good head coach at some point. And this would be kind of a different direction, right, if you hired a guy like Brian Hartline. It would be a similar type of hire to, Oregon getting Dan Lanning, right, a guy that's never been a head coach, but it's a young guy. It's done a lot of good things, a good recruiter, lots of energy, and you kind of take a chance on him and see what he can do. I think he would be okay. I think he would have some success there. But then the question is, as a guy that is a Buckeye through and through, which Brian Hartline is, he obviously played for Ohio State too. Are you going to go to Penn State, right? And a guy that you've worked so closely with, and Ryan Day, you're going to be an arch nemesis for him going forward. Like, I don't know. They'd give him a lot of money. It would be a great opportunity to win and really show what he's made of. But, be a rival of Ohio State, that just doesn't seem like something Hartline would do. But, again, I do think he's going to be a head coach at some point. I do think he wants to be a head coach at some point, and I do think he will be a successful head coach at some point. And this would be interesting to him because is he ever going to get an opportunity where, he has this amount of funding right away, right? If he gets a head job, it's not going to – like he could get a head job at Penn State and he's a national title contender. If he goes somewhere else for a head job, is he really going to be a national title contender? Probably not. But just the rivalry there aspect, it would be aggressive, obviously, from Penn State because it's a shot in the dark, right? He's never been a head coach, first-year play caller, and that would certainly be really, really aggressive. But Joel Klatt mentioned that name. It's interesting, but I just think I have a hard time wrapping my head around him leaving Ohio State for Penn State, which is – it's not Michigan, but it might be the next thing there as it relates to that. All right, got a few more minutes here on the show. Let's talk MLB playoffs here for a second. Game 2 of the NLCS tonight in Milwaukee. Yamamoto and Peralta, I believe, is the pitching matchup. Dodgers win that game last night 2-1. Freddie Freeman, guy's unbelievable. Hit another postseason home run for the Dodgers. And then they were able to tack on another one in the ninth, and they were lucky for them because the Brewers ended up scoring in the ninth and then had an opportunity there with the guy on third, 2 outs to bring him in. Not able to do so. So Dodgers up 1-0. I think they're probably going to win again tonight. I think as a baseball fan, we would like to see it be a close series, right? But it doesn't seem like that might be the case here. We'll see. We'll see. It was a close game, but feels like the Dodgers are going back to the World Series. I was wrong. I did not. I was rooting for Seattle against Detroit because I thought they would give the Blue Jays the best fight. But I did not expect this as they mopped the floor with the Jays yesterday, 10-3 victory. They beat them in Game 1 after playing a 15-inning game a couple of days prior, and they fly to Toronto, and then they win. Just gutsy. Gilbert was out there throwing last night. Wasn't at his best, but remember, he was out of the pen in Game 5 against Detroit. So that's really interesting. That series obviously doesn't play tonight. I would assume they're back in action tomorrow for Game 3. But, Seattle, that's a real team. That's a fun team, too. Polanco, what he's been able to do, second base, driving in runs, clutch hitting, right? You saw that even in the game yesterday for him. Longtime Minnesota Twin, obviously. That was a great addition. And then you got, Rosarena in the outfield with J-Rod. And they just have pieces. Cal Raleigh, of course, one of the best players in the sport right now. And they've got guys all over the place, and they've got a staff, man. They've got a really good pitching staff and a really good bullpen. And they're up 2-0. I did not see that coming. I thought they'd be able to give, Toronto a fight, but I thought this thing at the worst for Toronto would be 1-1 going to Seattle. But they have a real opportunity here to, take over and, go 3-0 in the series and then, potentially be head of the World Series for the first time in franchise history, which obviously is kind of crazy to wrap your head around, to be honest. So we'll see Game 2, Dodgers and the Brewers tonight. I had some conversation as it related to the Kansas City Chiefs. We won't do the full segment here as we're just about out of time here on the show, but the moral of the story is this: the AFC is not good. Right, there isn't one elite team in the AFC. You can make the argument there isn't one elite team in the National Football League either. And the more this, is the case, the more it's just these teams kind of hanging around there. It's a nightmare situation for the National Football League or the teams in the National Football League, because that just makes Kansas City that much more dangerous. If there's going to be teams that don't pull away, even in that division, right? The Chargers, they started out hot. They had a chance. Denver, a lot of people believed in them coming in here. They had a chance to really separate themselves in this division through a few weeks, and they weren't able to do that. In Kansas City, obviously now it's 3-3. They just beat the team that I had at number 1 in my power rankings, the team that's really good in the National Football League, beat the crud out of them at home. And, now they're in a spot where they can go on a run here. Now, their schedule is difficult. I'll pull it up here on the fly. And that's going to potentially, hinder them a little bit. But, they got the Raiders this week. That's going to be a victory for them. And then the Commanders after that. The Commanders don't look like they're as good as many people thought going in. Then the Bills after that, right? Then the Broncos, then the Colts, then the Cowboys. So there's some teams and there's some potent offenses they're going to have to go against. But Patrick Mahomes, man, obviously with Burrow out, I've said that Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the National Football League. I believe that when he's healthy, but he's not healthy right now. And when he's not healthy, it's Patrick Mahomes. And the past few years, it's kind of been like, the Chiefs, they're winning these games. They're showing up on, 3rd and 4th down and late in these games. But start to finish, they don't look very good. This offense for the Chiefs looks as good as it has in several years. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, it hasn't looked that great the past few years, and they've won Super Bowls. So that's obviously a dangerous spot for the rest of the NFL. But the Chiefs are real, and they're going to be a threat here over the course of the next few weeks, and hopefully somebody can hang with them and give them a fight. Bengals play in 2 days, Sunday night football, or Thursday night football, I should say, at the Jungle against the Steelers. I think they're going to win. I'm just going to go out there and say it right now. I think the Bengals are going to beat the Steelers at home. The environment's going to be raucous. There's going to be a lot of Steelers fans in there. I'm thinking about, finding a way into Paycor Stadium on Thursday, TBD on whether or not I do that or not. But I think it's going to be a tremendous game, and I think it's going to be a tremendous game for Cincinnati. Might not look the prettiest, but I do believe Cincinnati is going to win that football game. Truly believe it. Haven't believed that since the Jaguar game, to be honest with you. And here we are. And all these weeks later, I think Cincinnati gets it done and gets a victory on Thursday. We will talk about that. We'll preview it over the next couple of days here on the show. We might have Reed Mouse on the show to discuss it. But critical game. I'm not going to call it must win, but I do think you need to go 2-1 or 3-0 going into the bye if you want to have a chance. But plenty to talk about as it relates to the Cincinnati Bengals throughout the course of the week. As always, appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Good viewership here throughout the duration of this show. If you missed any parts of the show, it's totally fine, and we understand. That's why we get the podcast up later this afternoon, wherever you get your podcasts, and then plenty of clips going out on YouTube throughout the duration of the day as well. We'll be back here tomorrow. Plenty of exciting stuff to discuss. We'll preview the Bengals. We'll do a little mini preview for that. We'll have our college football top 10, and we'll talk a little bit about the baseball game that is being played tonight. That's all coming up tomorrow. But until then, take care, everybody.